Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The next session will begin in 2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the moderator of the session, Amanda Coakley.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session. It's really lovely to have you. My name is Amanda Coakley. I am a journalist, and I'm a Europe's Futures Fellow at the IWM in Vienna, the Institute for Human Sciences. So we're here today to talk about tackling the Kremlin's global influence. It's a massive topic, as we all know. So since Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, there's been a renewed interest, we can say, in malign Russian influences throughout the world, and of course, the institutions that unite democratic states. As we know, the Kremlin's nefarious hand can take on many forms. It can be undermining free and fair elections. It can be the dissemination of disinformation. And it can also be manipulating Western financial systems. It can even be as blatant as an EU member state, demanding that the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, is exempt from the bloc's proposed list of individuals on sanctions. So in the weeks and months ahead, it's very likely that the Kremlin's malign influence will become even more aggressive, that'll become even more opaque. And of course, this means that there's an awful lot at stake for our democracy. So to shine more light on this, I'd like to introduce our speakers. They are Daniel Eriksson. Here he is. You can say hello. Karl Stoltz, Viola von Cramon, and Marian Majer. Can you give them a round of applause? Thank you. Great. So, Daniel, I wanted to start with you. Many rousing speeches after Russia's invasion of Ukraine about, we need to tackle the Kremlin's malign influences. Sanctions were agreed. How effective have they been, and what more needs to be done from where you sit?
From our view at Transparency International, first we welcome the sanctions and the efforts to drive out dirty money. However, what we see, which we expected as well, and very clearly, we released a report last week which called Up to the Task, where we analyzed the financial task forces that have been set up. It's very clear that the use of anonymous shell companies, the lack of beneficial ownership transparency registers, and most of all, the insufficient resources being put to the law enforcement agencies that are supposed to actually implement these sanctions means that it's really just skimming the surface of what needs to be done. Sure, there's high-profile seizures of luxury yachts, things that are nice for the mass media, but are we really making an impact and going after the money? Can we do it at all with the lack of beneficial ownership transparency? No.
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 Okay. And if you want to respond to this. Karl?
I really don't feel able to assess the value of the sanctions. I know that the sanctions that have been put on Russia by the international community, including the United States and the EU, have been unprecedented in scale and scope, and I think that time will tell the overall impact of those sanctions. One particular set of sanctions that we've seen implemented by many countries and by social media platforms, not sanctions, but efforts to label and identify Russian disinformation and state-funded Kremlin media outlets. I think it's very important to make sure that the international community understands where the messages are really coming from and not allow Russia to cloak its messages internationally through false front operations. And I think that that's very rewarding, but I would agree with Daniel that more work needs to be done in that area as well.
Do you think, for example, there was a picture in the mass media about a Russian yacht that was in, I think, the UAE. Do you think that there needs to be a lot more work done on, say, European states, the European Union, having to kind of really push beyond, you go into again the foreign policy space and then speak to Abu Dhabi, speak to Riyadh, and try and kind of link up to tackle kind of the diversion of the sanctions?
First of all, there has to be a recognition that dirty money, corruption, is a threat to democracy. It is just not a way of making money, a convenient way of increasing profit in the banking sector, and us having to get at that in order to hurt oligarchs in the Russian state. This dirty money seeps through our society, funds misinformation and disinformation campaigns, is used to set up corporate structures that is there to erode our democratic states. And we're seeing it time and time again, unfortunately, even through civil society. Once that recognition is made by the pro-democratic countries of the world, that this is a question of our continued existence, then I think the will come into place to fight this not only from a Russian perspective, but from wherever it might come from. So things that are really low-hanging fruit and that could be done tomorrow. Who needs anonymous shell companies these days? What is the good use of it? We know that the bad use of it is, in this case, to hide money, to fund subversive activities. Is the benefits worth having them?
Marian, I'd just like to bring you in here about from your role in defense in Slovakia. How do you defend against disinformation, misinformation?
Let me maybe first to react what was just said. And we all know that the expectations is very high, and we all expect that we'll do maximum possible. But at the same time, we need to understand the reality, and understanding reality means that we are doing much more than it was expected. Much more than we did whenever in the past, 2008, 2014. And I can tell you our example here in Slovakia, and then creating questions whether it's enough or not. We are hardly dependent on Soviet kind of military equipment. We are hardly dependent on fossil fuels, as was just discussed by a president of the European Commission, and we were able. Nobody just a couple of months ago, nobody would imagine that we'll be getting rid of this in weeks. So we are getting rid of Soviet equipment, providing assistance to Ukraine. Soviet equipment which was connected to Russian companies, which we paid money for maintenance, for operating these equipment. The same with fossil fuel dependency. Of course, there are some exemptions when it comes to Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, but nobody would expect that this will be happening. So that's why it's still, it's half full, half empty glass, and I agree. I'm not here to defend everything what we are doing, but I'm just saying that we are doing much more than we and many people would expect we'll be doing. Just very shortly, your question. Yes, Slovakia was one of the most affected countries in Europe by hybrid activities of Russia, which had an implication for attitudes of people. In Slovakia, now many people think that not Russia is the cause of the war, but I don't know, the West, NATO, whoever. We are trying to do our best. We adopted some documents. We made some measures, building up some capacities at the ministries, at the other institutions. So we are taking it very seriously, and also some people who are working on this are here in this room, and we need to be consistent and to work also with other countries as well.
Thank you. Just to say as well that members of the audience, you can ask questions. We'll get to questions in the end, but you can also ask questions via your Slido app, and please do pop them in. Viola, I'd really like to come to you about basically support from Moscow for anti-EU politicians, anti-EU parties. How concerned are you about this? And I suppose what steps can be taken to try and counter their influence, but then also kind of that balance that has to be struck between, people's freedom to be represented by who they want to be represented. How do you see that issue right now?
Maybe one word or two words on what the other panelists have said. I think one fact is true. The expectations were extremely high on what sanctions can actually, or how effective they can be. On the other hand, I think what we have seen is we need an EU regulatory framework on how to confiscate, what are the standards, and also you said the law enforcement body, but also on transparency. We need definitely a different EU framework than what we had before, because we saw quite successful cases such as France, Belgium, and Italy. They have confiscated, I think, 10, 20 times more than, for example, for Germany. So in that respect, and this is exactly, for example, what anti-corruption NGOs in Russia, but extremely often the colleagues from Ukraine have told us, you are the enablers of the dirty money in the European Union. You have never worked on behalf of the interest of our people, because this is stolen money. So, and a little bit the possible similar thing is with a party. So Russia is very experienced to disunite us. Russia is very experienced to pick those party who has a clear anti-European approach and who have an anti-democratic approach. It's not so much about right-wing or left-wing, but most of the right-wings or the populist party are easier to catch. And this financial structures behind some of the parties and the so-called support is really hard to detect. Some are financed by, let's say, NGOs from Switzerland. There are accounts in different countries. But I think what unites us in the European Union is now that almost each and every state has experienced this muddling into the election. And that's why, for example, this INGE committee, where I'm a member of, was composed, was established, and now the mandate was even prolonged, because we see this is a long-standing topic, an issue, a problem, and a challenge we have to treat in a different way. We have to treat in a more systematic way. We need to raise awareness. We need to work more on the citizens' education, voters' education, but also on all this financial support on transparency laws for parties and so on. And in some countries, we are at the very beginning, and of course, when then it is merged with, let's say, religious influence and religious interest, it is even harder to, to detect the sources of the money.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, and I appreciate all of your views on this, how do you think Moscow has reacted to the rule of law crisis in the European Union? And also really the actions being taken now in regards to Poland and the release of funds, or the path to releasing funds to Poland. Do you think that that is playing into their strategy, that now, given the war in Ukraine, the European Commission has to make clearly what it sees to be difficult compromises between ensuring that it can effectively support Ukraine, but then also allowing member states to kind of get away with really undermining EU values? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, generally, I think they use all the weaknesses of the European Union. And of course, it is a very tricky question. While Poland, on one hand, of course, is doing a lot now in the war and has, of course, stepped up in many sectors, many fields where we need Poland. But on the other hand, we should not give them any discount on the rule of law. I don't know how much that was echoed in the Russian media, but I could imagine it would be easily to use that as a case that we have double standards and that we are not coherent and we have not, let's say, a strong approach on values and norms and standards and so on. So it is definitely not the easiest way how to deal with this. And of course, many in the European Parliament had regretted the decision of the EU Commission yesterday.
Karl, I'd like to come to you about 2014, and let's just go back a little bit, Russia's annexation of Crimea, the war in the East. And there were sanctions put on Russia. And again, this issue of malign influence came up on information. But also there was a real importance at the time on kind of keeping a diplomatic corridor open. We don't want to kind of alienate Russia too much. It really was a big discussion at the time, and very different, of course, to the discussions that are having today. From a US perspective, what do you think was done right in 2014, and what should have been done to kind of weaken some of Moscow's influence?
Well, I think we've seen since 2014, obviously, the consequences of not taking enough action at the time has enabled Russia to continue to use these tools that it uses to manipulate the truth and to be emboldened by that to try other ventures since 2014. So in hindsight, obviously, a lot more could have been done at that time of the Crimean crisis and the first Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think it's very ironic that Russia denies to its own people the access to the free flow of information that they seek to exploit around the world. We've heard other speakers, we heard Ursula von der Leyen and others speak today about the dependence that the world has on the flow of Russian fossil fuels. There's another flow, and that's the flow of falsehoods. And the Russians have been very good and have perfected their ability to spread the same falsehoods they tell their own people on a global scale and to exploit democratic differences among people. So while we value the fact that people have different opinions and have a free debate over those opinions and reach a consensus based on a free and open debate, they don't allow that sort of public debate or democratic process in Russia anymore, and they stifle the opportunities of their citizens to get that information. So it's a challenge that goes two ways. One is the exploitation of the free flow of information globally, and one is the challenge of making sure that the people of Russia, the people of Ukraine that are in occupied areas now continue to get the access to the information they want and not just the Kremlin line. Speakers earlier today talked about how not only is the challenge to Europe, the challenge to the world occurring right now on the battlefields of eastern Ukraine, but it's really occurring all over the world, in Europe, in the United States, on a global scale now in cyberspace. We are all engaged in this war, whether we will continue to have a flow of information that we all can trust and presents a variety of opinions, or whether we go to a style of information flow that Mr. Putin would prefer, where there's only one alternative point of view.
Mm-hmm. In 2014, what were you tearing your hair out about what wasn't been done?
I mean, I agree with Karl there that the topics should have been taken more seriously already at that point in time, because now we have to pay the debt of having had 8 years of, and I'm mainly concerned about the information space campaigns rather than the cyberspace. They're both bad, but on the information space...
And the financial space.
Of course,
yeah.
But relating to what Karl said, because in the end it's the financial space and the lack of transparency in that funds these other activities. If we went with sanctions towards individuals or corporations, because that's what I'm talking about with sanctions. I don't refer to the fossil fuels or high-tech export sanctions. I'm talking about targeting funding for these kinds of information and cyberspace campaigns. Had we done that much earlier, just to take one example, the pandemic. During the pandemic, we saw many societies being split in two with anti-vaxxers and other movements. How was those movements funded? Where did that come from? Whose interest was it in order to ensure that there were cracks and erosion in democracy during such a difficult time as the pandemic? Had we taken things seriously already 2014, maybe we would have dealt with the pandemic in a better way.
Interesting. Today, Germany is trying to strike that balance, keeping some corridors open.
Sometimes I'm afraid that not everyone understood what is on stake, at least in my home country. I'm very much concerned that there's still this imagination of a balance. So last night we had a debate in Berlin with a chief journalist from one of the broadcasters, and again he said, but we have to listen to Moscow and what the Kremlin said. Well, but this is an orchestrated lie. This is part of the hybrid war. How can you take this into consideration as one source of information? This is to destruct a society. This is to undermine all the democratic, and also it is to undermine your journalistic effort with proofs, with standards, with ethical standards. I mean, this is not equal. You cannot just use TASS or a Russian agency as you use your own correspondence on the ground. And so I think there's a complete misperception still in some of the media agencies or broadcasters. And how to deconstruct this, I don't know.
Marian, what's your thoughts on Germany's position, France's position? Macron seems to always be on the phone to
As I'm
Putin.
as I'm traveling around Europe, I can see the differences, of course, in the attitudes of particular countries. It's a long-term. It's a long-term environment, so it's not completely new for us. And always I can remember, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years ago, when Balts at NATO were saying, yeah, Russia is a threat, and everybody was like, you are crazy.
Yeah.
And then 2008, 2014. So of course, inaction or the lack of action in 2014 was a trigger for what Russia was doing and how much money was investing to different kinds of activities, especially here in Central and Eastern Europe. And we can see it. They're the real outcomes. We can see it on the attitudes of people. We can see it on the behavior of political leaders of some political parties, so on and so forth. So I agree that if there would be more action that time, many things would not happen, and we would not have this. Same debate. So I would not comment, as I'm in governmental position, I would not comment on Germany's government activities, but what we are trying to do is to explain and to, I've been in Germany last week. I had in last 2 weeks debates with my counterparts at the Ministry of Defense. So we are trying to explain what are the needs, we need more action, we need more activities, because if I'm coming back to providing military assistance to Ukraine, if we are getting rid of our military equipment, although it's obsolete and although it's aged, we need some backfills from other countries, and we need more activities. So we have very frank, I would say, discussions, and yes, we would expect more from many countries. It's not only about Germany, it's many countries on the West from us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So there's many questions on the Slido. Thank you very much, everyone, for adding them. I guess, look, this is a question that comes up time and time and time again. This is from Anonymous. Where do you draw the line between countering misinformation and freedom of speech, especially on social media?
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
I can touch that one because it's a very sensitive issue also here, as we disbanded some websites or some communication channels. What I'm trying to say or to explain is that we have some regulations everywhere. You cannot go to the grocery store and to buy anything. You can't go to anybody to loan the money. You have some regulations everywhere. So why not to have regulations also in social media or information space? It's just impossible. We were just trying to use this notion of as a freedom of speech, but we see it here that freedom of speech cost quite much harms on the attitudes of people, on the attitudes of politicians, and it's mostly because here in Slovakia Facebook is the most popular. It's mostly because there was no regulation. One guy for the whole country who from Facebook who is checking the content. It's just not workable. So that's why yes, it's a sensitive issue. It's need to be taken very carefully when taking some measures. But inaction is not possible.
You want to go first? There's a clear distinction between misinformation and disinformation. So misinformation is if somebody really believes and doesn't understand that the information is not true, is not right, is not correct. Disinformation is intending to disinform the society, individual groups and people. And only, we would say, in the case of a war or a case when you really destroy, or when you really harm, when really something is under threat, then we would start really regulating this. Otherwise, it is about informing, it is about detecting, it's about transparency, it's about fact-checking, it's about marking things, but we don't want to regulate social media in general. We don't want to cut off channels. I mean, we do this now with our sixth sanction package, but this is clearly, as I said before, a Russian hybrid tool for hybrid war. But that is a big distinction to ordinary people, citizens, Facebook groups, and so on. So don't get us wrong when we speak about regulation. It is about a very certain, let's say, channels or groups or, I don't know, closed groups where we need to look much closer into this.
I'm just going to go to the audience after this, but I just wanted to ask you all one question. As I was saying before we came out, I think it's very important not to neglect China. And when we're looking at misinformation and disinformation, when we're looking at foreign influence, it's not just Russia. There are other players, and it's not just China as well. There are many. But maybe, Karl, where does China fit into your day-to-day, and how much is it on your radar?
Okay, I work at the Global Engagement Center, which is part of the State Department, and our primary mission is looking globally at sources of disinformation, not misinformation, or people that have the wrong information and believe it to be true, but don't willfully spread it. But we see plenty of examples, Russia most notoriously, as we've discussed, but also the People's Republic of China, Iran, various violent extremist organizations spreading information that they know to be incorrect or trying to manipulate the social media space so their information gets a much larger audience than would actually be justified by the number of people who truly follow that information. So our job is to expose and help build the tools that others can build resilience to detect and reject disinformation. It's not easy, but it's really not something that can be easily regulated either. We all agree we don't like it, but to try to get rid of it is not so easy. They can very quickly shift. They live in the shadows. They can go to other spaces and try to continue to exploit it. So we work with social media companies, we work with international partners, we work with public audiences, we work with journalists. But it's ironic that the Kremlin or the leaders in Beijing try to frame this as a freedom of expression issue, a freedom of speech issue. It's actually the people fighting disinformation that are supporting freedom of speech and supporting the truth and access of valid information to everybody. The people who want to defend themselves as protecting freedom of speech, if you look at their own societies, there is no freedom of speech, there is no personal freedom, and they want to impose that system on others. People that live in Eastern Europe remember the communist era and how leaders that were dying actually just had colds, according to the media, or the fact that there were walls and fences between East and West was not to keep people in, but because they just didn't want to cross the border. Everyone here is used to those lies being perpetuated by the state authorities, and right now we see in the Kremlin and Beijing leaders who want to go back to that system of telling their own people and the world falsehoods while exploiting the fact that we still have a free flow of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe, I fully agree with Karl, and I believe that transparency as to information sources is really important on social media, and some steps have been taken in that direction. Further steps need to be taken. But to summarize this up, it's quite obvious. Once again, you have the anti-democratic forces and you have the pro-democratic forces. The anti-democratic ones are proactively using the weaknesses of the democratic countries. Free speech, civil society space, all of these things that we take for granted, they go in and abuse them for their own good. If we start to regulate so the free speech becomes less free, they have won. So we have to find out a way of living with it. Transparency of information sources is one. Education is another one, not to believe everything you read. And I think that's a generational issue as well.
What China does extremely smartly is to buy the public space. So I'm working very intensively on the Western Balkan. They have started systematically buying newspapers or shares of newspapers, founding new newspapers, founding new NGOs who publish things and who shape the public space and the public opinion in a way that nobody dares to criticize China when they have human rights violation, when a strategic investment is not being liked by the public, by the civil society, by the citizens. And this is extremely important to have more research on that. Where have the board shares, in which editorial boards are they in, and so on, and to really detect where is Chinese ownership already there and where they increasingly try to get more, and also to warn governments, even mayors and so on, to make sure people are aware of the influence. And then they use their economical influence to put pressure on politicians. They shut down different authorities. They make sure even in our Eastcom, Stratcom unit, they put pressure on diplomats in a very blunt way. They teach their own diplomats how to use Twitter in a way which no other country does. So they have different layers and different levels, but extremely effectively, and of course with a lot of money. And it's not the end. I mean, they have just started to influence. And in other countries where you have more vulnerable states and they have a stronger, let's say, economical ties and a bigger dependency, it's even more dangerous.
And at the same time, as they're doing this in societies with free speech, we as Transparency International, we have had to close or in one way or another freeze our activities in more than a dozen countries over the last 2 years, which is more than we've had to do over our 30 years of existence. So in those countries without democracy, let's call them, things are shrinking extremely rapidly so that there is no free speech and nobody can use those kinds of tools.
I'd like to go to the audience. I know you're all waiting for Aleksandar Vučić, who will be with you in 15 minutes. So hang on in there. Yes, someone will come to you with the microphone. Pause in the air. This gentleman's waving quite dramatically over here. Clearly he has something that's... And please introduce who you are and ask a question, and please avoid long statements.
Okay, thank you.
Even though there is freedom of speech, which we know.
Yes,
but
thank you for...
Please stand up as well.
Okay, cheers. Bart Kot, Warsaw Security Forum Program Director. I was wondering, because I want us to go back to these pro-Russian politicians in the West, in our countries. So I was wondering, do we really have to wait for history to judge the accomplices? Or do we possess any kinds of measures, schemes that we can introduce in our electoral processes other than only transparency registers or education that can actually exclude those Putin's cronies from our democracies? And I would really like to underline that those are not only populists, as it is very often actually put into our media, but also the regular politicians that are right now even the mainstream politicians. Thank you.
I mean, I'm in the European Parliament, also in the DEC. This is a subgroup of the AFET committee, of the Committee for Foreign Affairs, so Democracy and Election Support Group. And we have a lot of fake observations. So especially Turkey, Azerbaijan, Russia is very effectively buying, let's say, our colleagues for fake observation statements. And on the other hand, of course, as you said, what we need to do is work on a sanctions catalog. This is one of our recommendations for the extension of our mandate on INGE, and hopefully the Commission is willing to do so. We see there is a broad majority in this, but it's a little bit tricky, to be honest. So we have already different sanction catalogs, as you know, on human rights, on others. And with the meddling into our elections, we will be working on that, but I fully agree with you.
Just going to the Slido quickly here, and we will get to this gentleman over here who is also waving his hand furiously. It's great to see so much enthusiasm. But just very quickly, on the Conference of the Future of Europe, I'm not going to talk about the brilliant interpretive dance. But this is from Anonymous. Can the proposals of the Conference on the Future of Europe be conducive to tackling Kremlin's influence in the EU? Do you want to take that? You want to take that? No?
I probably.
Was there just-
I mean, conducive. Well, I hope that the setup of the conference for the future of Europe, on the future of Europe, would be, let's say, a role model how to use participation, citizens' participation for future, I don't know, dialogues or whatsoever. But it was quite an effort to organize that. I hope that the EU institution will continue on doing so, and we could, of course, use that to counter also Kremlin's influence. But we see, to be honest, there was quite a bias. So we saw quite an enthusiasm in the West and the Scandinavian countries, but less so in the South and in the East. So we need a little bit more regional spread in that respect. But nevertheless, yes, this could be an approach.
This gentleman here, second row from the back. It's there next to you.
Konstantin Eget, freelance journalist currently with Deutsche Welle. I actually would like to continue on what the colleague from Warsaw said. And look, I'm old enough to remember the Soviet Union, so it would have been unimaginable in 1983, for the Kremlin to buy a share in, I don't know, the Times of London, for example. Would it be possible to go, because most of us recognize that China and Russia are not even challenges but threats, why wouldn't the Western countries go for more direct bans? For example, banning former civil servants from joining boards of Chinese companies, actually outright banning China from, or the Kremlin for that matter, from buying shares in Western publications. Can it be more robust, actually? Because all this kind of dancing around freedom sometimes is quite sort of a slippery slope, if I may.
And then Roland, there.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
So first of all, the bans. So yeah, we'll just remember that. And then.
On the same issue.
Okay, brilliant.
So I'm Roland Freudenstein, Vice President of GlobSec. Now, let me be a bit sacrilegious here and disagree with the mainstream. We're all on the same page.
But you do have a question.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Although a short opinion,
we have 10 minutes.
A short opinion is also good.
Okay, short
I, as a
opinion,
moderator, always
followed by a snappy question. Okay.
I'm the host.
I know.
The trend here is that it's all about Russian money or Chinese money. It's about disinfo, fake news, and all this. I think we're on the wrong track. All this is important, but the main battle, if I look at the main appeasers, the most vocal appeasers when it comes to Russia and China, I mean, like, you know, people like Schröder, for example. They don't have to be on the payroll of the Kremlin. They don't have to be victims of misinformation or disinformation. They truly believe that appeasement works. So the battle is a political one. And this must be carried by civil society, by NGOs, think tanks, political parties. And there's a lot that can be done in terms of best practice and exchanging of arguments and so on and so on. Do you think I'm right?
No.
That was the question.
What a and I think question of the panel goes to, do you think I'm right? 9 minutes. So on this issue, you know, outright ban. So yeah, let's start with outright bans. Karl, you know, in terms of at the State Department, how many conversations are you having about things like, you know, really kind of strict outright bans?
We have a lot of those conversations, and hello to Konstantin, who I remember from a long time ago when I was in Moscow. Yeah, I mean, we actually don't want to follow the tactics that Mr. Putin or the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party do in terms of trying to control who can have a voice in the media. We actually support, we try to support independent voices throughout Russia still. And I would say Russians who are interested in participating in the international media debate, and there are many Russians in exile now who are seeking to do that, are also very welcome. Because again, I think what we're standing for is a society that allows as many opinions as possible to participate in the public debate. And we're contrasting that with countries that don't believe in that tactic, but would love to exploit our systems to make them less open and less democratic. And I think it's very important that we stand for those values, because if we give up those values, we follow the tactics of the adversary, and we know where that could lead. I think it's easy to get very pessimistic when we look at the flow of disinformation around the world and the challenges we all face and think that this is sort of the beginning of the end. But if we had this conference on February 25th, I think most people would not think that Vladimir Zelensky would be joining us by video feed 3 months later talking about the future of Ukraine. So I think we have to put things in perspective. This is a long-term battle. The only way we can really fight the enemies of truth is with the truth and with solidarity and unity. When I was very young, there was a problem around the world with hijacking airplanes.
Yeah.
It was constant. Everyone thought there was nothing that could be done about it. There'd be no way to stop planes from being hijacked all the time by different groups for political or financial reasons. Then it stopped. And it stopped because there was an international agreement to not provide safe harbor for people hijacking and to give them legal punishment. I think if we explore these options, international frameworks that identify and hold accountable people who spread disinformation knowingly, it's possible for it to go away, but it will take a lot of international effort.
Yeah.
Maybe on the last question of Roland Freudenstein.
Is he right?
I would say partially.
Okay.
Partially.
Now, we have 6.5 minutes until
yeah.
Aleksandar Vučić, and everyone here is counting down. So.
We can agree that it's a complexity of different factors. So it's hard to say that this works and this doesn't work. We need to combine all efforts all together. So even people like those true believers, it didn't happen like that, you know. So it happened somehow as a consequence of education, as a working in some environment. So it's not just by some coincidence. And maybe one point on bans. Difficult question as well, but I'll give you another example, whether it works or not. I would agree with what was said, that maybe sometimes the bans are at least temporarily. We are not saying for, 30 years, but at least temporarily, because, for example, in 1998 or 1990, when after the collapse of Cold War and after when democratic societies have been spreading all around countries, like Czechoslovakia at that time, later Slovakia, we were afraid to ban Communist Party, for example. And because we didn't do that, it happened. It appeared again in different forms, not only in that particular form of Communist Party, but those same people, the people who were accepting some benefits for decades, they were just influencing the further development of these countries. So I think, and that was a mistake that time. Because we were afraid to do that, because there was a spread of democratic ideas, and the bad consequences were there. So,
Thank you. I just want to go to the Slido. Viola, this might be you. How come Russia Today and other banned Russian propaganda channels are still available in EU hotels, including in Bratislava? Maybe it was you as well.
I don't know, maybe probably hotels are operated by Russian companies.
Well, there we go.
Exactly.
Really?
Exactly. No, I'm not making any accusations here, but
Can
how would we
everyone
know?
go back
How
now
would
to your
we know?
hotel and see what's on your hotel and then let us know?
Now, just to answer the second question there, just saying he's wrong, clearly. I can elaborate a little bit, but I say follow the money. And that goes to answer this question as well. Follow the money. See the complexes behind all of this. And right now we can't follow the money because we don't have the infrastructure, the tools, the resources to follow the money. So all of these bans, they're just lip service. This is what I opened up this session by saying. There's so much lip service. The first question, which was really good as well, which requires a really long answer, is that, in my eyes, no democracy on the planet today is a good enough democracy. We have to find that democracy 2.0. And in that democracy, we have to confront some really tough questions. So that, for instance, the influence of money in elections. You know, it used to be that corporate interest was the big problem, yeah, the oil industry or whatever it was. Now it is the foreign corporate and foreign government interests that are perverting our elections through buying off individuals, not only for electoral observation, but also candidates and interest organization in and around politics. We have to find that democracy 2.0, which is a completely different conference.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of to wrap up then, for our audience here, when they go back home or at family dinner later on in the week and they say, oh, I attended a panel on Kremlin influence, and their family or friend asks them, you know, what did you learn? What can each of you tell us, just very quickly in one sentence, is the key thing that has to be tackled when it comes to Russian interference in our democracies?
Root out dirty money everywhere. Accept it as a poison to society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Karl?
Everybody has to do their part to fight in the information war. Everyone is a potential victim, and together we can fight it and truth can prevail.
Don't be naive. Look through things. Take things very seriously, and make sure naming and shaming will be possible. And vote for the right politicians who make sure that democracy will prevail.
I can just imagine you saying to someone at dinner, don't be naive.
Not you.
Anyway.
I would say everything starts with good education, so critical thinking is something what is missing in many countries, in many people. So I would suggest to invest more to this effort, and then yes, it's the outcome will be not in 1 day or 2 days, but we need to be patient.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all very much. I think we've covered an awful lot of topics, from disinformation, misinformation, a little bit on dirty money, a little bit on EU, anti-EU parties, and then on course kind of the challenges today that you're facing. And thank you very much to everyone who asked questions and asked questions on the Slido. Just to say, oh God, the Slido's gone down. There was some other questions here just that we won't get to answer, but was about, you know, combating disinformation and Russian propaganda at home and abroad as well. So thank you all very much. Up next is Aleksandar Vučić. He will be here in a few minutes, or a few less than a few minutes. I'm not exactly sure, but you will know him when you see him. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Kevin Barron.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the 3 o'clock session. You're there, I'm told, and I'm here, I'm told. Unless they tell us something differently. This is EU and Serbia, a strategic partnership for the future. My name is Kevin Barron. I am the executive editor of Defense One, a media partner for GlobeSec this year. I am a journalist from Washington, a Pentagon reporter by trade. We're a national security website that covers business threats, technology around the world, and of course, international policy conferences like this one. And it's my pleasure to have the one-on-one interview now with President Aleksandar Vučić from Serbia. So Please welcome to the President. This is a high-level conference of people that know probably a lot more about Serbia than I do in this room. So my intention is that this is not to be a long conversation between the two of us with a few questions at the very end, but rather my job is to bring you into the conversation and make sure that everyone gets a chance, or most people get a chance, to ask the President questions about anything you like, probably about the EU. That's the title of the session. Mr. President, first of all, welcome and congratulations on your re-election recently and your swearing in this week to your second 5-year term.
And the last one.
We've heard already from our speakers today. Ukraine is the main topic, even though a lot of these sessions are titled about the EU. It's all wrapped in together. And in your election, I think perhaps more than a lot of events around Europe right now, encompasses the crossroads of the difficulties with Ukraine, with the EU, with relations with Russia. You said, in all my research for our meeting here, you said in your either campaign speeches or victory speeches or in your swearing-in speeches that you want EU membership, pushing for EU membership, but at the same time, the big news of the last week or so has been this gas deal with Vladimir Putin and Russia. For 3 years, meeting Serbia's needs on one hand for energy and meeting Serbia's needs for everything else that comes with EU membership. So my first question to you is, can you do both? Or I guess if your answer is going to be yes, how can you do both?
Everybody is doing both. Sorry that I'm saying something that someone don't want to hear it, but the truth is that you cannot survive without gas supply, and we have always been fully dependent on Russian gas, 100%, and there are several other EU countries, but gas supply is not even on a sanction list. It's not a question. There are a few countries that actually refuse to use Russian gas, but they are just reversing the gas and paying that special tax to the neighboring countries, but still they are using Russian gas. We're doing our best to diversifying our energy supply, and had a good discussion today morning with Majer here, and we'll create a new strategy together with European Union, seeing how we can get real gas supply from tap and TANAP. In the future, for that we need to build, and we are constructing that interconnector between Bulgaria and Serbia, and we need to start constructing interconnector between North Macedonia and Serbia as well. And that would be an opportunity when we can decide differently. And actually, we need to survive, we need to act rationally and pragmatically, although I know that nobody wants to hear these words. You know, when you have a sort of hype in which everybody is just reiterating and repeating the same, it's very difficult for any kind of rational talks. But yeah, well, our main and strategic goal is becoming a part of European Union. We have some specific issues to tackle with, including Kosovo issue, which we see differently from some member states. And at the same time, because you mentioned that yesterday, I swear in the Serbian parliament, I was speaking about necessity of reaching compromising solution with Pristina, and that's what we need to do in the future, and that I believe would create new possibilities and new opportunities for reaching this full-fledged membership status within European Union.
What are the steps to EU membership then, specifically regarding this gas deal? We heard from von der Leyen this morning that one of the key goals for the EU is energy independence. So if you have to have this deal to survive, but your path is for the EU, have you had meetings? Is there a plan that you're looking for? That what are you willing to do to apparently the need to cut off from Russia to achieve energy independence that is called for by the head of the EU herself.
The issue is that in Southeast Europe, Hungary, Serbia, I hope that Bulgaria will be able to getting enough quantities of LNG, because they got some promises from Washington, and I'm still not certain 100% that that is going to be valid this year or another year, but no doubt that there were no quantities of gas enough for us. 6 years ago, I went for the first time to Baku, speaking to Ilhan Aliyev on this, and then we couldn't afford, or they could not afford, any quantities to Serbia. Now we spend almost 3 times more than we used to 10 years ago. It's 3 billion cubic meters annually, and it's gradually, these numbers are gradually increasing, and it means that with this 10 billion cubic meters of new gas through TAP and TANAP, there would be some possibilities to get something of that, to get a chunk for us. But still, we don't know, and that's why we need to build this. It's very important for us to building this gas infrastructure, gas interconnectors between Serbia and Bulgaria, Serbia and North Macedonia. Then we'll be able to receiving it, and then you can diversify your gas supply, and that's what you can do. Before that, we can't do it.
I want to talk a little about Russia and its relationship to really your election, your coalition, and the political struggles that we're hearing about from Serbia. In some of the reporting on the election, the AP wrote, the Associated Press wrote, that opposition groups and foreign observers said the April vote was far from being free and fair, and that Vučić's autocratic rule sidelines the government and parliament. OSCE had an election report that was more forgiving. That said, what the elections were not bad. I'll paraphrase it. But your party claimed, or you claimed 60% of the votes, but lost a significant number of votes since the 2016 election. Like in many other European countries, the right wing of Serbia is gaining seats. So, complicated politics with a complicated history. Explain to folks here, what does Putin mean to Serbia, and why why there's a struggle within Serbia to still align with Russia when, as even 4 months into this war with Ukraine, when so many other sharp changes have happened across Europe?
First of all, thank you for asking me this question, because it gives me an opportunity to saying the truth. I'm not going to speak about elections. I believe that people of Serbia spoke in a way they wanted. When you say you got less, it's good that people here should know that I won in the first round, getting 61% out of valid votes, which is not bad. Speaking about parliamentarian elections, we could have done better. Speaking about parliamentarian elections, yes, we had a very bad result with getting 43% as a political party, but the second one got 12, just for people to know here. The issue is that many right-wing parties got much bigger support, and exactly because of Russian-Ukrainian war. Because we were acting, I believe, in a very responsible way, and many of our voters were very angry with us because we voted at United Nations General Assembly against Russian incursion, Russian invasion, whatever you call it, against Ukraine. Because people in Serbia, not because people in Serbia, they have something against Ukrainians. No, nothing at all. We consider them as true friends. The issue is that people in Serbia still remember what happened in 1999. We have more history than we can swallow, that's true. And in 1999, Serbia was bombed by 19 NATO countries. And now they say, well, when you were doing that, you were not speaking about territorial integrity. Now we hear these words, territorial integrity, every single day. But at that time you didn't care about territorial integrity of Serbia. Sorry that I'm very blunt and very open. And of course you have traditional ties, very good traditional ties between Serbia and Russia, which is not easy. Not easy always to explain it, but yeah, that's what really hurt us at election day. At the same time, I believe that we should act pragmatically, that our strategic goal should remain European Union. That's what I emphasized yesterday. And we are not aligning with Russia because we condemned in a legal and political way what happened in Ukraine, and in a very clear way. There is one thing that is very much true, is that Serbia did not impose any sanctions against Russia so far. But you need to understand our political situation, that so far we have had always support from Russia and China on Kosovo issue, on territorial integrity issue of Serbia. If we do it differently, we're gonna lose that kind of support. On the other hand, you have to know that today 42% of people in Serbia, they think that it was something wrong, that incursion against Ukraine. 35%, they don't care. But still you have 77% of people in Serbia, 76.7% of people that are against any sanctions. You can of course always impose your will against the people, but that's not good. You have to speak to people and you have to see whether there are any reasons for that. And I believe that politically, legally speaking, we did our job in a very principled way, and because we'll always be on the side of Ukrainian territorial integrity. But here we come once again to the question why all these people that are very strong today in their wishes, in their demands and their requests to keeping territorial integrity of Ukraine were not that vocal in 1999.
One of the other aspects of European unity mentioned earlier today was the extraordinary step of funding or arming the Ukrainians against the Russians. Is that something that you can see, you could envision happening under your
we have always been helpful when we were asked to donating money or medications, and we donated so far 3 million euros plus humanitarian aid. I'm going to visit Ukrainian refugees tomorrow afternoon in southern region of Serbia, close to Vranje, and we were very helpful to them. That's what we can do. But speaking about the ordnance, armament, weaponry, we are not going to be a part of a war.
Why not?
Why not? Because we don't want to be a part of a war.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if you have a question, by all means, raise your hand.
You know, when you ask that question,
yes.
Just, Kevin, just put yourself into our shoes. Would you do that if you were asked? Because in 1999, who was helping us? And there will always be people that would say, well, it's not true. And then I would say, well, you were using the same narrative. Exactly the same narrative. Some people were saying in 1999 we were preventing genocide. And some people are today saying we are preventing genocide, but from the other side. Today you don't like these words, but 23 years ago you like those words. If you have, either you have principles, either you don't have it. But if you have principles one day, you cannot change it within 20 years.
Okay. Those who have questions for the audience,
you shouldn't invited me, you know, because I'm not a part of this mainstream, you know, very vocal political opinions.
That's why you're here. If EU membership is your goal,
you have to
if
find
EU
someone.
membership comes through.
You have to fight. You have to find someone to punching him badly. Okay, good.
Well, you can raise your hand. You can use the Slido app as well, which they will be feeding questions to me here. And in addition, we'll have a word
There
cloud.
is Team Judah eager to killing me.
We will. And in addition, soon we will have a word cloud for you to participate in once we get a couple more questions in. So I'll go to the vigorous waiver behind me. Yes. We have a microphone coming to you.
Thank you very much. I'm Tim Judah from The Economist.
Could you stand, please? Thank you for the cameras.
Thank you very much. I'm Tim Judah from The Economist. Now that Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova have applied for membership, is this something that you, Serbia and Western Balkans in general, can leverage and use to encourage Brussels and EU and member states to say, look, fine, they want to apply, but what about us? It's time to sort of use this moment to accelerate our accession process. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, is anyone talking about it? I mean, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. You know, you can laugh at me now. I'm a political veteran, and we all learned our lesson, and it looks like this. Whenever we go to Brussels, and we go very often, and whoever comes from the Western Balkans, doesn't matter whether it's someone from Montenegro, Bosnia, North Macedonia, Serbia, doesn't matter. We all learned a lesson saying, you need to speed up all these processes because we have a sort of exhausted and tired people now use this opportunity, and you know, then all those people are fed up with us listening the same type of story for 10 or 20 years, and then nothing happens. This time we are not saying this, but we expect something, Tim. We expect something to be changed, and it's not, okay, we know our obligations, and I know that we need to do a lot of things regarding rule of law, democracy issues, media issues, and all the other issues. And I know that we need to reaching a sort of compromise between Belgrade and Pristina before we get into the European Union. But the issue is that we need to see a sort of determination and decisiveness among member states and in the Brussels as well. We are profoundly grateful to them because they have always been helpful to us regarding the most terrible floods that we faced with in 2014, migrant crisis, even any single or particular crisis that we were facing with. We have always been getting some fundings from European Union, but the issue is whether you really count on us or not. If you do, we can really speed up our work on different type of reforms. And I hope that it might happen. I hope that it might happen, because if I can foresee, I don't expect that something might happen regarding the Western Balkan states in June. If there is someone who can gain something, and I'm not certain about it, it's going to be Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. I don't believe that something will be changed with North Macedonia and Albania, as many others believe differently. But I'm a skeptical guy, I told you. You shouldn't invite me. Anyway, nothing will happen with Serbia and Montenegro, no doubt. But we'll have to do many more things before December. I put a lot of hopes for December on next IGC, and I believe that we can do a lot of our homework, and in the meantime I think that the situation in Europe is going to be much clearer than today, and then we'll have bigger decisions from Brussels and Berlin and Paris in particular, to be very honest, and then we can expect something bigger and something better for the Western Balkans. Not this time, not in June. That's what I believe in, but here are 20 days before that IGC on 23rd of June. We'll see whether I was right or not.
Someone right here in the middle.
Simeon Chomokos from the Delphi Economic Forum, Mr.
Thank you.
President. Congratulations for your new appointment. You are the undisputable leader in Serbia, there's no doubt about it. You have led the Serbian nation for these last years. You are going to do it for the next few years. What do you think is, what kind of legacy you would like to leave behind? I mean, what is your vision? How would you like to see Serbia, emerging, when you are in the exit of politics?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tsamokos. Can I make a joke? Which is...
I'm not sure.
Which is not really... Which is not exactly a joke. It's... when you Google my name, apart from many terrible things, you see the recent news. Well, there were pro-Russian protests organized by Vučić regime in Belgrade. And those protests were, just for you to know, at least for you that are present here, protests against me. And they were chanting, Vučić the gay betrayed our Russia. And it was depicted in all Western medias like I was organizing these protests and that and that. And 2 days ago, when we agreed in general terms with Russians on gas arrangement, which is not bad for us, I saw Associated Press and all the other medias were saying Serbia violated sanctions against Russia. How? Which sanctions? There are no sanctions on gas. But it's always the easiest way saying something against Serbia. Oh, autocrats, dictators, and everything else. And now come to the... And then when you face that, then whatever you say, who cares? But what is really happening is that I'm very much satisfied with the economic development of Serbia. In last 2 years, cumulatively speaking, Serbia was the fastest growing economy in an entire Europe. You wouldn't believe it, but it's true. We thought that we could have only Djokovic or our basketball, water polo players, the best in Europe, but in last 2 years, the biggest growth rate belongs to Serbia. In an entire Europe, we invested hugely into many infrastructural projects. That is something that I believe that people will remember me and our team. Many highways, many high-speed railways, kilometers, then a lot of factories, a lot of production plants. Let's say when I became the prime minister, German companies were employing in our country 15,000 people. Today, German companies employ 77,000 people. 77,000 people. And still, our public debt to GDP ratio is 52%. When I became the prime minister, it was 79%. And we did not increase it even during COVID-19 crisis. During this crisis as well, will remain fiscal stable, and I believe that after all, people will remember that we kept peace and stability, which is not always easy for us, particularly for the nation that was the real champion of number of wars that was participated in 20th century. There is no other nation in the world that can compete with us on this. And I believe that now we are approaching a new era, and in this century that we won't have any kind of clashes with anybody in the world.
That's an economic legacy answer to the question.
Yes.
On our Slido board, one of the top questions I'd like to ask or to read, what EU members, wrong one, where is it? Here we are. What view would Serbia, if it eventually secures EU membership, take on EU-NATO cooperation and coordination?
We have no problems with, we are not politically neutral because EU path is our strategic path, but speaking about military, we are militarily neutral because of the very obvious reasons from the very recent history, but we have a very good cooperation with NATO particularly in Kosovo, because we need to work together with KFOR on a daily basis, and so far we have had a very good cooperation. Through program Partnership for Peace, we developed a lot of joint approaches, and we learned a lot, and we exchange our views almost on a daily basis with them, and we have nothing against the other countries' choices being a part of NATO. Have no problems with that, but we have our choice, which is confirmed by the Parliament's declaration being militarily neutral. That's it. But we didn't have so far any problems. Jens Stoltenberg, he used to live in Belgrade as a kid. He knows us, we know him, but it's not all about that, but he helped us a lot in bridging some difficulties from the past.
Question, this woman here.
Maria Snigova, Center for New American Security. Mr. Vučić, you've been quite a vocal critic of sanctions on Russia. What sanctions design on Russia would you propose?
I don't believe in sanction policy, but it's up to you. You're big guys, we are small guys. We cannot harm anyone apart from harming ourselves. And I'm doing my best not to harm my own country and our own people. But if someone was asking me privately, I would have advised something differently, but you have much smarter people than I am, and they'll pick the best.
I want to ask if we can bring up our word cloud before we get to our next question, and people can lodge some answers that they can show us later. Oh, it's already up. There we are. What issue is blocking Serbia's EU membership the most? What's your reaction to that?
It's what you see here.
No surprises?
No surprises at all. Of course, it's always easy criticizing someone. When you say divided population, I don't know what does it mean, to tell you the truth. But anyway, it's but when you say Kosovo, yes, I do understand. What does it mean? And I do understand, and that's why I'm insisting on and not hiding that from my own people, that we need to reaching a compromising solution for the benefit and for the sake of all in the Balkans.
We'll see it change, and we'll bring in our next questioner here behind you to your over your right shoulder, sir. Oh, in the front. I meant the front row, but we can take both if you like. Apologies.
Samuel Abraham, academic from Bratislava. Dobar dan, gospodin.
Dobar dan.
Whenever you were asked about Putin, Russia today, you revoked back to 1990, the bombardment of Serbia, which was a horrible thing. In that year, I received faxes from intellectuals from Serbia, from Beogradski Krug, Obrat Savic, and they said, do everything to stop bombardment. And the reason was that Milosevic would use it to really put them to jail, to put more police state over those people whom he could get rid of. It was a horrible thing, the bombardment, but you know, you saw Kosovo on the board. Mm-hmm. We know what legacy it is. It is a legacy of Kosovo Pole, of course. And the 1999 bombardment of Serbia is something that was, of course, caused by Milosevic in a great extent. And you cannot overcome that because the Kosovo Pole and Kosovo is such a trauma, and I understand perhaps more than many people in this room, and I sympathize with Serbians in this respect. But unless you overcome, unless you see that Milosevic was a cause, great cause for that misery, you won't have majority of Serbian stand today when Putin is a true aggressor. You know that. You cannot say it because you are dependent on Russia. There is a great community.
Can you pose a question?
Yes. And I want to ask you, when would you be able to deal with the Milosevic trauma that could help you and the Serbians to deal with Russia and Putin in a way that you should, and that would help you to get to the European Union?
Thank
you. It's a good question. The issue is that, of course, I disagree, at least partly with you, because if you justify the aggression against one sovereign state and doing that aggression without permission of the Security Council, United Nations Security Council, which was done against Serbia, then I don't know what kind of justification someone might find. As you know, for us it is today also a part of Serbia according to our constitution, but in that 1999 for all EU member states, Kosovo was a part of Serbia, and you were bombing one sovereign state, one independent state, because of something bad was happening on its territory. And there is my counter question. If someone wanted to bomb Serbia to taking 11,000 square kilometers from Serbia, well, where else that happened in the world? When you did something to Iraq, why didn't you take Basra from Baghdad or vice versa? Why didn't you do it with Aleppo from Damascus? Someone was just taking territory from Serbia, and I'm not saying that that would be good. And that's why I think that all the people should understand the reasons and why this is not very simple for us. Speaking about Putin in Ukraine, yes, we were very vocal, and we have always been defending territorial integrity of Ukraine. Serbia did not recognize Crimea as a part of Russia. It has never happened, and it won't happen. And we'll be stronger in defending Ukrainian territorial integrity than many of EU countries, because we have principles. We have principles. It's a part of UN Charter. How can you say that someone violated UN Charter, Russians violated UN Charter today, but when someone else did it? And even today we have effective Resolution 1244, which is not respected by anyone in the West. And there are no responses to this, and no one can answer to this. And this kind of red herrings, this kind of ambiguity, that is something that that is not easy for us. And still, if I was not asked by you, I would never speak about it. These are all the difficulties we need to overcome, and I agree with you on something, that we need to overcome our mythological past, partly, and we need to face the future and some tough decisions, and we'll have to do it. But you know, someone has to put himself or herself into our shoes as well, and then to see that it's not that easy, and it's not that simple as it looks. And the world is not black and white, like many people say today. Sorry that I'm once again saying something that is not very popular.
I don't necessarily believe you're saying anything that's unpopular as much as it is maybe right down the middle. You know, after this panel, I'm doing a similar panel with 3 prime ministers from the EU. And one of the differences I've noticed in my research is that some country leaders are calling for a total win. That they say over and over again, Ukraine must win in the war, or some version of that.
Some people are expecting not a total win, but a total defeat of the other side. That's different.
That's another way to put it.
Yeah.
Others are calling for, are looking at negotiation.
And
even Zelensky himself says the war will end with a negotiation at some level. Where are you in between total win and playing for negotiation?
Yeah, I see that I'm here to spoiling your party. I don't believe in total wins and total defeats. We need peace as soon as possible. And then in that peace, you can defeat the others much easier than militarily. And I'm not going to speak more about it. I just don't get a sense of continuing war and killing people on both sides. Because, you know, we can discuss this, you know, like philosophically, what is that solution? But there are thousands of people that are dying on a daily basis, which is not even fair to be discussed. Anyway, I believe that we need peace as soon as possible. And then you resolve this issue within the next 15 years, 20 years, doesn't matter. One day means a lot, at least 1,000 people more alive. And you're right, there are 50% of Western countries that are hoping for total defeat of Russia, and 50% of them that are ready for some kind of Russia's defeat. I believe that peace is the only solution. And the most important thing that we need to deliver on as soon as possible. And that's what I said to President Putin when I had this telephone conversation with him 3-4 days ago, that we need peace.
Our last question I've been promising behind us.
He was speaking a lot on Ukrainian issue. Yeah, he was saying that he has always been for peace and he's going to fulfill his aims. As he was saying that to Stoltz, Macron and to everybody else. And of course I was not insisting on that. I was insisting on good solution because I'm a small guy. We have big guys that are able to make influence on him. I'm not. I have to take care of small issues for my small country and for my people.
Our final questioner, yes.
Alica Kizakova from Institute of International Relations, Prague. Mr. President, thank you for your frankness, and I appreciate hearing your perspective from you, not from media. And my question relates to China, because we spoke a lot about Russia, but not necessarily about Serbia's collaboration with China, but about 16+1. With the Lithuanian withdrawal, there's a lot of encouragement to dismantle this collaboration. And what is your take about why to preserve it? What's the benefit of having this framework in Europe? And perhaps how you envision further engagement of China in Central Eastern Europe going forward?
The China question.
Thank you. You
40
see,
seconds on the clock there.
40 seconds. Okay, I'll do my best. First of all,
take your time.
Everybody was always asking me something about Russia. But the fact is, when I became the Prime Minister 8, 9 years ago, Russia was trade partner number 2 of Serbia. Today, Russia is number 5. And the biggest chunk of our trade exchange is gas supply. China was number 9. Today, China is number 2. Germany was number 5. Today is number 1. There are a lot of changes, but Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria went up. All of them. And these are big changes, but nobody's noticing it. And China is by far more present in Serbia than Russia. But, you know, nobody wants to notice it because now everybody's obsessed with Russia. And we have good cooperation, good collaboration with them. I cannot criticize that because we had no problems with them so far. We had no problems, we had no issues with them. They were buying our steel mill when nobody wanted to have it, when Americans were bringing back that steel mill to us for $1, as you know, in Smederevo, and then they bought, although we, according to EU rules, organized transparent procedure for our copper mine in East Serbia, and Chinese one easily, and they take care of that in a very proper way. Have no problems with that. Speaking about our own interests, we are a small country. Germany is by far number 1 partner of Serbia. China is number 2. But it also speaks about the others. and their engagement in the region. You cannot be always present when you need something. You have to help to those small guys when they need something. Sorry that I'm saying this. And it took more than 40 seconds.
As you're entitled. No. Mr. President, thank you for answering our questions and for coming here today. I'll remind everybody to be back here in the Maria Theresa's room for a session called Prepared for All Situations, the Future of Multi-Domain Operations, after a short coffee break.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.